65 years. Think about that for a moment. Not 65 years of life, or 65 years of a career. 65 years playing the same man, on the same street, in the same fictional corner of Salford that has become one of the most recognizable places in British cultural life. When Coronation Street first aired on the 9th of December 1960, William Roache was already Ken Barlow. He was Ken Barlow through the Beatles and the moon landing, through Thatcher and Blair, through VHS and streaming, through decades of television history that have seen hundreds of shows rise and fall while the cobbles remain. There is no precedent for what William Roache has done. There is no comparison. There is simply Ken Barlow, and there is the extraordinary man who has carried him for 65 years and is showing absolutely no signs of putting him down. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are celebrating something genuinely unique in the history of not just British television, but world television: William Roache's 65 years as Ken Barlow, Coronation Street's last remaining original character, and the fascinating new interview in which he has opened up about his process, his struggles, and his deeply personal philosophy on aging, life, and what it means to inhabit a character for longer than most people's entire careers. This is a story that deserves to be told properly, so let's take it from the very beginning. Ken Barlow was there on the first episode. A university student, already slightly out of step with the world around him, clashing with his working-class father Frank, played by Frank Pemberton, over education and aspiration and the kind of future a Barlow boy was supposed to want. That tension between Ken's intellectual ambitions and the grounded, practical world he came from became the foundation of a character who has spent 6.5 decades being simultaneously admirable and infuriating, principled and hypocritical, deeply loved and occasionally impossible to like. Ken Barlow is not a hero. He is a human being. And that distinction has kept him compelling for longer than any other character in soap history. The early years established the life that would later be complicated, enriched, and repeatedly turned upside down. Ken became a teacher. He married Valerie, played by Anne Reid, and they had twins, Susan and Peter, the latter of whom would grow into the beloved and perpetually troubled Peter Barlow, most recently played by Chris Gascoigne. And then tragedy. Valerie died because of a faulty hairdryer, one of the show's early landmark moments of domestic catastrophe, leaving Ken a widower with 2 small children and a grief that the show handled with a seriousness that set the template for everything that followed. His second marriage, to Janet, played by Judith Barker, ended in the devastation of her suicide. And then, eventually, came Deirdre. And Kirkbride's Deirdre Barlow became not just Ken's great love but one of the defining relationships in soap opera history, a couple so embedded in the national consciousness that when Deirdre was briefly imprisoned following a miscarriage of justice in 1998, the story made national headlines and prompted genuine public outcry. The nation cared about Ken and Deirdre in a way that went beyond soap fandom. They were part of the furniture of British life. But no great love story comes without complications, and Ken's wandering eye ensured there were plenty. The Wendy Crozier affair, in which Ken's relationship with his research assistant Wendy, played by Roberta Kerr, broke up his marriage to Deirdre, is still remembered as one of the show's most talked about infidelity storylines. And then, at the age of 55, Ken became a father again. Daniel Osborne, now played by Rob Mallard, was born from his relationship with Denise, played by Denise Black, a storyline that added yet another dimension to an already richly complicated family tree. Ken and Deirdre eventually reunited, because of course they did, and they remained together until Deirdre's death, mirroring the real-life loss of Anne Kirkbride, who passed away in 2015, in one of the most genuinely moving confluences of fiction and reality the show has ever navigated. Since then, Ken has settled into the role of patriarch, the keeper of the Barlow flame, the man trying to hold together a family that includes alcoholic Peter, endlessly scheming adoptive daughter Tracy, played by Kate Ford, troubled Daniel, and grandson Adam, played by Sam Robertson. It is a role that suits him and challenges him in equal measure, and William Roache has played every beat of it with the ease of someone who stopped acting a very long time ago and simply started being. Which brings us to the new interview, and what William had to say about his extraordinary process. He described his approach as pseudo-method, but not in the way the term is usually applied. For William, It was simpler and more profound than any technique. He was not playing a character vastly different from himself. He was playing himself as Ken Barlow. In his own words, he does not act. He simply does, and he believes it. He absorbs, takes it all in, feels that he is Ken, and proceeds from there. It is an approach that sounds deceptively simple until you consider what it means to sustain it across 65 years without ever losing the thread. Most actors move from role to role, reinventing themselves constantly. William Roache has gone deeper and deeper into the same man, finding new layers with every passing decade, but he did not shy away from honesty about the moments where even that deep familiarity was not enough. He described only a couple of occasions across his entire run where a storyline genuinely defeated him, and the one he discussed in detail is both fascinating and deeply human. Ken had an illegitimate child, a storyline that required him to protect this child fiercely, fight for him with everything he had, episode after episode. And then, in a single scene, the child's mother arrived and Ken simply let her take the baby without a fight. William could not do it. He told the producer plainly, he could not make that moment work. He had been so invested in protecting this child as Ken, so personally absorbed in that fight, that surrendering in one sentence felt impossible. The producer acknowledged that the writing had been too sudden and too abrupt, but by then it was too late to change it. William described it as a big wrench, and the word choice tells you everything. Not a professional frustration, but something that pulled at him personally. His explanation of why it affected him so deeply is one of the most insightful things a soap actor has ever said about their work. He said he feels like Ken's caretaker rather than his portrayer, that his job is not to perform Ken but to look after him, to protect him, to make sure he is treated with care. When a storyline required Ken to do something that felt wrong, it was not William the actor resisting on technical grounds. It was William the caretaker refusing to let harm come to the person in his charge. The fan and media reaction to this anniversary and this interview has been exactly what you would expect for something this significant, warm, odd, and in many cases genuinely emotional. Coronation Street communities have been sharing favorite Ken moments, debating which era of Ken was their favorite, and expressing a gratitude for William Roache's presence on the show that goes beyond ordinary appreciation for an actor. He is, for so many viewers, a fixed point, proof that some things endure, that continuity has value, that the character you grew up watching can still be there when you are grown. What William had to say about aging was perhaps the most unexpectedly uplifting part of the interview, and it resonated far beyond soap fandom. He spoke about refusing to think in terms of years, about enjoying life and getting on with it. And then he said something genuinely remarkable, that as you get older, the pressure to slow down, to give things up, to take it easy, actually accelerates the decline it is supposedly protecting you from. His belief is the opposite. As you get older, you should do more, not less. Life is a miracle, he said. The body is a miracle. And it is capable of far more than we give it credit for. From a man who has been turning up to the same job for 65 years and still means every word of it, that philosophy carries a weight that is hard to argue with. Looking ahead, Ken Barlow's story continues, and the Barlow family, as chaotic and complicated as ever, ensures there will always be something for the patriarch to navigate. With Peter, Tracy, Daniel, and Adam all capable of generating drama at any given moment, Ken's role as the calm, slightly exasperated center of the storm remains as relevant as it ever was. And William Roache, by all accounts, has absolutely no intention of going anywhere. 65 years. One character. One street. One man who decided somewhere along the way that Ken Barlow was not a role to be performed but a person to be cared for. There is nothing else like it in television history. There may never be again, so there you have it. A celebration of William Roache's 65 extraordinary years as Ken Barlow, and the remarkable interview in which he shared his philosophy on acting, aging, and the single storyline that almost broke him. We would love to know your favorite Ken Barlow moment across all those decades. Drop it in the comments. We genuinely want to read every one. Give the video a like if this brought back some memories, share it with a fellow Corey fan who deserves a reminder of how special this show is, and subscribe with notifications on so you never miss an update. We will see you in the next one.